I'll also join in acknowledging the Gadigal peoples on whose land we enjoy our presence today, and pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging. That's a good reminder. Thanks, Lee. So welcome all. The title of my speech, is that up there? It is. Yeah, innovation should be celebrated, not hidden as the elephant in the room. I'll come back to that point shortly. Probably like you, I'm always inspired by the incredible talent that we do have in this country when it comes to innovation. Companies like Anatomics, this is a business, Melbourne-based now, started with $1,200 grant from the hospital that the founder researcher, Paul Durso, began with in Queensland, and now designs and manufactures bits that can be implanted into us. He does this by enabling with 3D medical imaging and then 3D printing of basically prostheses that can be implanted safely and with efficacy inside people that need these things, for example. And they're made from titanium and polymer composites that do the job. And the company now, Anatomics, exporting to about 40 countries around the world. The latest product they have, which is a new-to-world innovation. We don't have a lot of those things. It's a new-to-world innovation that works, and that is a whole sternum that enables people with collapsed sternums around lung and chest areas to actually have a prosthesis replacement, and it is life-changing, as you could imagine. I asked Paul Durso, the founder, how can you make a business like that, a bespoke manufacturing and delivery product and service like he's got, how can you make that scalable? And he explained his future model this way. He imagines and sees that he can have a distributed model where every accredited hospital in this country can have its own 3D printer and can download his designs and software directly into the hospital, where the surgeon can make and fit safely and quickly in his own hospital the part. Sounds good. Not only that, he can do that globally. He thinks his major customers within the next 5 years will be in China. And not only that, that the materials, the powders to print these parts will be from processed rutile. So titanium apparently derives from the processing aspect of rutile, together with the polymer composite. So it can be Australian materials driven, clearly Australian software driven, and a distributed model globally. And what do you know? It employs quite a lot of people. So I guess just a couple of quick comments. I mean, my own career in investing in venture and private equity, you know, you look for people who come up with new ideas and can scale a business globally. And my original startup was in 1970. I was very young, Dean, at that stage, yeah. It was a VC company, the first venture capital company in this country. And I started with a war chest of about $500,000. Seemed like a lot of money at the time. I whittled it down for a while. We had, that war chest was added to by Hill Samuel, the precursor to Macquarie Bank, who chucked in a couple of $1 million back then in the early 70s. And I guess looking back, I probably should have put all that money back into Macquarie Bank, which is now over $100 a share. But nonetheless, it proved to be an exciting trip for me. It wasn't until the late 1990s that I began investing in digital and internet-enabled businesses. These included some very early stage internet-based businesses that all went up in smoke. It also included a company called LookSmart, which was one of the earliest search engines. It's not that long ago, but you know, it's 20 years ago. And that was pre-Google, pre a lot of the firms that we know more famously since. But we made 150 times our investment in that company. And it was a lot of early lessons. LookSmart became outplayed by the Googles and Microsoft in due course. Other companies we invested in, like Seek, started by the Bassett brothers, very small, very ambitious, was going to try and disrupt the classified ads business of media companies like Fairfax. And what do you know? They're still with us. Their market cap, I just checked, is about $6.5 billion. Fairfax, who never wanted to talk to us back then because they were going to see us off. Market cap today, post the sale of Domain, I think it's about $1.5 billion, but about 4 times less than Seek. So it's a salutary how quick these disruptors can be successful and stay around and employ. Companies like this are critical to our country. They do grow jobs, they exports, they make profits, they pay taxes, they provide superior products and services to consumers here and abroad. And yes, their success is built on innovation through their own ideas, their own investments, and through the support of a broader innovation system nationally, where government does have a role, only a part of a role. And let me talk about another company called Anatomics. They worked with Cyro to work up the 3D skills and some of the other software engaged. But they also accessed the Research and Development Tax Act and the Export Market Development Grant Scheme, all facilitating and helping. What's changed since I first began investing is the intensity of the global competition for IP. We're really now in what's been calculated as a $1.6 trillion per annum, US dollars per annum, global innovation race, where the rate of investment in new technologies is increasing every year. And to keep creating jobs and prosperity in this country, we will need many more innovative companies like the ones I've just spoken about, Anatomics and Seek, but you know so many. WiseTech, Richard White's companies here today, Atlassian, CSL. We've got them. We just don't have enough of them yet. And to do this, we need an innovation system that does better support and accelerate innovation at scale, from the startups through to the CSLs. So in late 2015, I was invited, as Dean mentioned in his intro, to chair what is an independent statutory board of the federal government called Innovation and Science Australia. And our remit was to come up with a strategic plan out to 2030 for how we could propel innovation outcomes for this country. We've got a board of 15 essentially private sector practitioners, VC people, academics as well. The chief scientist is the deputy chair of the board, and we value our independence. If we lose that, our advice ain't worth it. We report directly to a cabinet subcommittee on innovation and science chaired by the Prime Minister. We started the exercise by doing a comprehensive review of what the innovation system is and looks like around the nation. We completed that review, and that included comparisons with innovation countries doing way better than we are, and what are they doing different, what could we copy, what could we think about doing differently, etc. We gave that report and published it in February, and since then have been completing the strategic plan and recommendations we think necessary to move the needle. That plan we gave to the government about 2 weeks ago. It's called Australia 2030, Prosperity Through Innovation. And pending, I'm expecting the government will respond, will release and respond to that report after the holiday season. End of January is my expectation. And so I can share only some of what I might have otherwise wanted to say more specifically today, but I think I can talk about the intentions, the nature of the thinking behind this report, because ultimately it's a report about the sort of economy and society we can aspire to and should aspire to by 2030. In other words, it's not a granular report about Section 14, little 2 stroke A of the RDTI Act or the Export Market Development Grant Scheme, although we do comment on those things and have recommendations about those things. It is a plan for continuing national prosperity driven by innovation, a prosperity less dependent upon the performance of our commodities exports, although I think they'll continue to be an important and happy part of our future, but not so dependent on those and not so dependent upon any continuing sense of favourable terms of trade. But a prosperity driven, more widely driven by an acceleration of the development and commercialisation of our ideas and our inventiveness. It is a plan to create more and better jobs, noting that fast-growing companies that innovate, export and scale up are responsible for virtually all of the net new jobs in this country in this last 10 to 15 years. And it is a plan to spread the benefits of innovation widely, such as giving Australians better access to breakthroughs in medical care. It's a plan founded on the belief that innovation is good for Australia. Innovation drives productivity, productivity drives GDP growth makes living standards improve. But neither terms of trade nor labour force growth will by themselves provide the sort of productivity experienced in recent history in Australia. And given Australia's ageing population, the real challenge by 2030 is unlikely to be a shortage of jobs. But it is likely to be a challenge about a shortage of workers equipped and competent to take on those jobs, to fill them. Now, I acknowledge there are genuine and sensible community concerns about the loss of jobs to innovation and disruptive technologies. And I guess I'm concerned that we don't let this fear make us circumspect as a country about championing innovation. Fears about job losses are not new. Innovation has been a constant feature of our economy for over 70 years, and in fact pointed out to me recently that the rate of jobs lost to automation was higher in the 1950s than it is today. Critically, this history shows us that in the longer term, the places that practice innovation, new and better ways of making things and of delivering services at home and abroad, they're the ones that keep creating sustainable jobs and prosperity. And it also shows the best way to prepare people for the impact of technology is to make sure education systems adequately prepare people with the knowledge and the skills they need throughout their working lives. The combination of innovation and education helps create new jobs to replace the ones lost and helps people adapt as their role changes. Their tasks may change, but they may still have their jobs. They'll be different for many. And of course, this will likely be more and more critical as technologies such as AI expand automation in the service sector and knowledge-based work. Now, a great example, it's another Melbourne-based company. Richard, you're based in Sydney, aren't you? Yeah, good. We'll hear more about Sydney later. Techstore Technologies. Now, this is a company a CSIRO colleague recently described Techstore as an overnight success after its first 10 years. I think we all know the role for resilience and patience, but this was a company, a struggling little manufacturer in Melbourne, supplying absorption fabrics of a sort, but worked out that it needed a complete new set of absorption fabrics to offer its marketplace. And again, with CSIRO's help here, so again with this collaboration, they now supply the fabric for hundreds of millions, I think it's actually got to 1 billion nappies per annum. So here's a little manufacturing company supplying a global value chain of Kimberly-Clark's for their manufacturing of nappies. And the key to Techstore's turnaround was the company's vision that with more innovative products and efficient production facilities, it would become a global exporter, or it could become. And they upgraded their factory, now a brand new facility near Tullamarine Airport, and that cost about 25 million bucks apparently, now paid back from cash profits, having talked to Paul about this. Phil Butler. What I found interesting was it's a state-of-the-art automotive factory producing this huge run of material, and they have expanded jobs, not reduced jobs. They have retrained every worker in the place over a period of only 4 years, working with new equipment, faster equipment, better equipment, globally efficient equipment, and have expanded the workforce. These innovations have transformed Techstore into a health core and hygiene leader, exporting across, in particular, the Asia-Pacific area. The business has grown by several hundreds of percent and opened up, as I mentioned, a multinational textile value chain. Stories like these highlight why innovation should be celebrated. To come back to my theme point today, you know, we should be celebrating and encouraging innovation and not treating it like some sort of elephant in the room that we've got to be very careful about discussing. Australians are smart enough to know that if you do things a bit better and a bit smarter, it might be a good thing and it might help. They already understand that innovation can enhance competitiveness and therefore living standards prospectively. And without innovation and without embracing it, I reckon they know that none of us should expect that She'll Be Right Mate is going to work much longer. Give them credit. Talk about innovation, celebrate it, discuss the success stories and the tough stories, and get on with it. So Australia 2030 is a strategic plan for Australian innovation out to 2030, as I mentioned. And it calls out, as we work through this exercise, it calls out 5 imperatives to be tackled if Australia is to close what is a considerable gap in innovation performance between it and our key competitor nations. And while we rank in knowledge creation and inventiveness very highly, we don't rank anywhere near those positions. In fact, well below average among OECD and competitor nations, other competitor nations like Taiwan and Singapore and Israel and others, in the translation and commercialization of these ideas and discoveries. How do we fix that? And we believe that we can expect to become a top-tier nation by 2030 if we tackle these 5 imperatives now as core policy priorities for the country. So this list of circles, too hard to read out there, but it it lists the 5 imperatives. One's about education, and I'll talk briefly about these. Education, industry investment in R&D, government as a catalyst for innovation, what else can it do? The research and development nationwide, the issue of academia and industry working together and collaborating better. And right in the centre there, we say some things about culture and ambition as essential to a game-changing strategic plan. So, let me start with education. Became pretty clear, and it's probably a no-brainer for you as well, that education is key. How can we, if we don't equip our kids to be, by 2030, equip them with the skills that they're going to need to be successful in the economy and the society that we see coming on, then we should put pens down on everything else, frankly. So education becomes absolutely core to any adventure we embark on now to improve innovation. So this curve set of graphs, I thought I'd just demonstrate the point. You know, the good news is this red graph, and I think Gonski won, has helped with this, and credit to the government. You know, the spend per student is up, and there's a lesser inequality. We've still got a way to go on that per student, per demography, but it's improving. And yet, in spite of that money spread, all of these other curves, the PISA on literacy and science and maths, are all heading in the opposite direction. We have to be able to turn those curves around. So that led our board into commenting about curricula, about teacher training and quality, and about where we saw the education system going and needing to go, and in that discussion, identifying the fact that unless we are able to also reboot the vet sector for the retraining and reskilling for future work that's going to be required, we'll have one hand behind our back. The vet sector's been knocked for six reputationally. It needs to be front and centre in the challenge for re-equipping people appropriately for 2030. Let's move to the second imperative, which really focuses on the challenge for business investment in R&D. This has been falling. This graph here peaked at 1.3% of GDP at the end of the, at 2008 GFC time, and has regrettably fallen to about 1% of GDP last year. So how do we turn that around? You know, we've got a number of recommendations about that in the report, and the plan includes, you know, how do you encourage more startups, more scale-ups like Techstore, Anatomics and Seek, the companies I've talked about, and this will require improvement in the design of existing research and development incentives, and you can see our present reliance in incentives is biased towards direct as opposed to indirect. I'm sorry, the bottom is where Australia is in terms of direct incentives and encouragement for business at 13% of total government involvement, as opposed to 87% of our incentives money being in indirect tax-based incentives. So we're not about finishing off that, but over time we would like to see the balance very much move towards more direct incentives and support to business. And I will have to wait till the report's released to talk further about that. Nonetheless, I can say, and you would know already, you know, exports have been, always are, will be a strong proxy for competitiveness and for innovative activity. Chances are, if you're successful offshore, you might be doing something that's competitive onshore. And of course, the difference is we've got 24 million customers here, and there's hundreds and hundreds of millions of customers in the other key markets. So we're looking to improve access to and strength of export market development incentives. Certainly my own early investment experience and due diligence was shortcut by concentrating on export activity in the companies, made my due diligence easier. Austral Ships, for example, we did invest in 1994, when it's already its main market was China, not Australia. It was a pioneer in design and construction of high-speed catamarans, ships that moved at 45 knots, not 15 knots, and as such became a disruptor then of tunnel and bridge builders. And today it's the largest non-US vessel supplier to the US Navy. Amazing achievement, really, and should be an essential part of Australia's future shipbuilding plans. Now, I mentioned government as a catalyst. The government actually has, and there's been press commentary and other commentary about what's happened since the NISA agenda. Actually, a lot has happened. Tax changes for high net worth investors, and tax changes to improve the ESVCLP investment structures, early stage venture capital limited partnership structures. So on the venture capital supply side, the response since NISA, it was about 350 million of annual supply in 2015, and venture capital has been a handbrake for early stage development of businesses and ideas in this country for yonks. It then went to 650 million or so. I've got a graph somewhere of this. Here we go. And then last year, to June 17, up to $1.25 billion supply of venture capital. And that has happened since NISA, and in large part in direct response to it. And of course, we've seen, and last night my attendance at CEDA Innovations reminded me of their annual gala event, amazing thing Petra will talk about, I'm sure, later today. But the activity in the startup incubator space is on fire, and certainly in Sydney and Melbourne and other major cities, compared to even 5 years ago, it is active and a hot space. It's wonderful. The Biomedical Translation Fund, which was a NISA initiative, a $500 million venture capital pool for health and medical research, later stage development of devices and molecules at clinical trial stage, has not only it provided a big chunk of new prospect for that sector, but also the composition of the investors. Half of them are superannuation funds, the other half was government. So this was a co-investment driven initiative out of NISA that's up and running and has made investments and is continuing to do so in a very exciting way. So there is a lot of stuff that's happened. I just remind people that we'd like to see a lot more, and we'll stay tuned for 2018, but stuff has happened and is happening. But you know, governments can do a lot more in terms of innovative procurement, innovative delivery of services, innovative opening up of data assets and curating them and providing usability of that data, and lots more. And we spent a fair bit of time and sets of recommendations about that in the report. On the research, development, collaboration imperative, number 4, you know, we concentrate on what else can you do to drive and encourage the public-funded research organisations and business to get together, to collaborate more for commercialisation. And, you know, we think there are lots of things that we can do about that. We think a collaboration premium of 20% as a carrot, not a stick, introduced into the tax, the RDTI scheme, the Research Development Tax Incentive Scheme, is a very good way to encourage more of that collaboration. We think that there are other ways, for example, the way the UK government has gone about funding specific allocation grants to universities for translational outcomes is also interesting. I mentioned the Biomedical Translation Fund. Blackbird Ventures, one of the Series A, Series B VC firms that has benefited from the NISA changes to the improvements to the structure of the ESVCLP, investment partnerships, recently invested in a exciting portfolio company called Baraha. Here's a company that is in the LiDAR. It's a LiDAR startup. LiDAR is light imaging, detection and ranging systems for particularly relevant to autonomous vehicles. And they've come up with a breakthrough product, very early stage, very high risk. It too benefited from what is part of the Entrepreneurs Program and an accelerating commercialization grant post-NISA for miniaturizing its three-dimensional solid-state laser system that fits on the top of the vehicle. It's about as big as my fist, and become the laser eyes for a moving vehicle. It's in a very hot space. It's collaborating with Osiro again, and it's in a race to become a supplier to what will be, or can be, a potential multi-billion-dollar market. So here's a brand new product, brand new set of technologies developed here, only about 7 people in the business. If it takes off, it's binary. It's either going to be part of the supply chain or it ain't, but it's a fantastic thing to see underway. So, you know, governments can help. The culture and ambition imperative I'll finish with is, you know, to succeed at innovation at the level we want to see happen, we need to be a nation that has the courage and the ambition to set bold goals, not incremental goals only, bold goals that deliver economic and social benefits and strive to meet them. And we believe a program of national missions, large-scale challenges issued by government, but beyond any one government or one enterprise by themselves. Those sorts of missions, high-impact projects, can help Australians understand and take great pride in the excellence of our science and innovation, and inspire and motivate all Australians, and certainly a new generation of Australian innovators. So we've recommended a number of candidates. I'd love to talk about them more today, but won't. But they are in the candidates in the healthcare sector, the energy sector, and the environment sector. They've all got the capacity to demonstrate fantastic outcomes for the nation with spillover benefits nationally and worldwide. I mean, it's not that we haven't had some of these in the past. Think Snowy Hydro Scheme, think the SKA telescope, for example. And they will attract and excite the brightest talents to solve big challenges with technological and societal solutions. I'll finish on the sort of funding and implementation very quickly about this, and let you, well, you are eating lunch. Let me get to lunch. We've designed the plan to be actionable by governments. The recommendations can be delivered with actually only a moderate increase in government funding. We want existing government funding, the $10 billion a year basically, which they invest in innovation around the system, to be better allocated and smarter. and we want better innovative activity from government, as I said, in procurement and other things. So the report does focus on better leveraging of that funding and building and encouraging business investment. I remind you that already business spends at least twice as much as government, maybe 3 times as much, Charlie, I think, in investment nationally. So it's not just about government, it's about business doing more. And so we make, and we also make recommendations, you'd want us to, I think, for rigorous ongoing evaluation of national innovation performance on a macro basis against 20 hard international comparisons that we can report against, and on a program-by-program basis against objective outcomes like, well, what's it done for jobs, exports, profits, sales? It's not about how many people come to the seminars or how quickly you get the grants out there. It's actually about what the hell happens when you've done that. So we're tracking all of that and are making sure that we are going to be accountable for doing so and being measured against those as well in a journey out to 2030. So all of this will only happen if we get a commitment to a whole of government implementation process, which will be essential for the successful rollout of the report's 30 recommendations. And in conclusion, I believe, and my board unanimously believes, that that our plan does provide a great opportunity for a reboot of this discussion and this momentum for innovation, which is essential to continue our world record-breaking run of 26 plus years of GDP growth. And by doing so, we believe Australia can be a top-tier nation for innovation and science by 2030, creating new growth and jobs and making us, in the process, a healthier and happier nation. So I thank CEDA and respect CEDA for this invitation to share those thoughts with you. CEDA, I think, has done a fantastic job over decades of serious engagement with national policy issues that make a difference and are important. I know CEDA will continue to. I look forward to, once we get the report released and out there, that we might have a more granular discussion and debate about some of the implications. Thank you.